Okay, this is lesson 3, and this is an expansion from lessons 1 and 2. Recall that those lessons 1 and 2, we talked about implied signs and parentheses. Here we're going to talk about implied signs and parentheses with mathematical expressions. And a mathematical expression is simply just like 1 plus 2, okay? Before we were dealing with single numbers. Now we're looking at a mathematical expression. This is not yet an equation because there is no equal sign, but it's just a mathematical expression. Okay, so before we get into the implied signs again in a mathematical expression, let's just look at this mathematical expression and make it an equation and put it on a number line. Okay, so what you do is you start with the first number. We're going to draw a number line. And to the left of 0, we go into our negative numbers. Okay, so we start with our 1 and start here. Now we're going to add 2. So whenever we add, we go this way to add, and we go this way to subtract. So we start 1, and we're adding a positive 2. And then remember now, that's implied from our last lesson. So 1, and you add 2 units, 1, 2, and the answer is 3, of course. Now that was pretty straightforward. And let's do this one here, 1 minus 2 equals. And on the number line, we start with our first number here. And we're going to subtract. Remember, now when we subtract, we go this way. And we're going to subtract 2 units, 1, 2. And the answer is negative 1. Now we could have just as easily have written this as we learned before, swapped the signs around, because remember, this has that implicit implied sign. And now a very important point here is you can switch these signs around. So subtracting a positive is the same as adding a negative. See how we did that? That sign went there. This sign went there. These are the same. These are equal. And let's just try it on the number line now. So we have 1 minus positive 2. So we start with 1. We're going to subtract, so we go this way, positive 2 units. 1, 2. And the answer is negative 1. And we'll look at it from this expression's point of view, and we should get the same answer. Start with the first number, 1. We're adding, so we're going to go this way to add, but instead of adding a positive value, we're adding a negative. So we got to go this way with the negative units, okay? So it's a little more confusing, but we still get the same answer, negative 1. And that was the same answer up here. So it's just really which way you're more comfortable with. I prefer to look at it that way. Some people prefer to look at it that way with the implied positive sign. Usually not there. Okay, now let's look at another expression. Let's have 1 minus a negative 2. Now just as we have this rule here, subtracting a positive is the same as adding a negative, we've got a new rule here. Subtracting a negative is like adding a positive. So these switched to these. Subtracting a negative is like adding a positive. One way I remember it is whenever you have 2 negatives like that, just come in and make them positives. Positives right there. That's all you do. That is much more intuitive than a 1 minus a negative 2. On the timeline, 1 minus negative 2 gets really confusing because you start with a 1 and you subtract, so you want to go this way, but you're subtracting negative units, so it actually goes the other way, 2 units. And it's just really confusing from looking at it from not a timeline, a number line. This is much more intuitive. Okay, so just to recap, adding a negative is the same as subtracting a positive, and vice versa. They're interchangeable. And subtracting a negative is the same as adding a positive. That's the big takeaway in lesson 3. Again, these changed to these. And again, the easiest way to remember it is just come in and make them both pluses. And of course, this can be an implied sign. And so that's what you get, 1 plus 2. All right, that's it for lesson 3.